I'll answer the question. You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. It's time to get complicated with my good friend Gervais Dargan from Animated Concepts, worked at Milestone back in the day. How you doing, Gervais?
I'm doing well, Wes. I'm doing well. As always, I come into these things with nervous trepidation, and then at the end of it, I feel okay. So I'm doing good.
We'll see about this one. This one's going to be a little bit different. There's actually a video out there, and I think it really magnifies or puts a spotlight on a lot of the dysfunction at multiple levels within the comic industry, whether it be just as comic books as a whole, how a lot of things are happening, within the creator circles, and people know about it, but they don't address them or whatever. At a publisher level, that this video that we're going to show, this person is clearly having a very difficult time. They're actually dragging one of the main writers for DC Comics, who they work for right now. Like at the publisher level, you wouldn't be aware of something like this. Now, this video that we're going to talk about, it's on YouTube. It's under T. Franklin's YouTube channel. It's only had like 230 views in the year that it's been out there. But it's been out there for a year, and I would imagine, based on what we saw, that DC Comics didn't know about it. Also, there are some accusations, one against Mark Waid that we'll talk about first. Scott Snyder does get mentioned when she's talking about some issues as far as white creators not standing up for Black Lives Matter while they're trying to kind of cash in on black characters, or T. Franklin puts it, black pain. And she even went into the sexual harassment kind of stuff as well. And there's even a little thread at the end I want to talk about. So there's like a professionalism issue. There's some allegations of, we'll get into there. I got the videos kind of clipped up, and we'll talk to them about them today. But this is one of the craziest things that I've ever seen. I can't imagine someone with a professional career putting a video out there and just leaving it up for a year for anyone to find.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so after watching the video, I'll say this. It's when somebody says that I'm from the Bronx and basically via Paterson, New Jersey, it's like, yeah, this is what you call a I don't give two F's video. And that's literally what this video is. And she is not apologetic. She's not apologetic about it. She doesn't care. Clearly, she has gotten to the point where it's just like there's some things that matter more to her than possibly keeping a job or maintaining a relationship with DC. And I said, man, you know, it's like the Bronx is one thing, but you got the Bronx and Jersey, oh, that's something else. And when people start getting into the I don't give a F mode, eventually two F's mode, it's like this is what it looks like. And it's something where clearly, based on the video when I watched it, it doesn't seem to be just one incident. It's like several incidents, and now it just, basically sort of like a volcano, she's just erupting at all of, at least on her end, the perceived hypocrisy and injustice that are going on with her colleagues, her white creators. So I mean, I would have appreciated a lot more context, particularly when she makes a charge about Mark Waid, and in terms of him using or feeling like he was entitled to or had the right to use the N-word in his work. And it's like that to me, it's like, okay, she's making that charge. I would have liked a little bit more context, because was it something where he was like, well, look, I'm a white guy and I'm entitled to do whatever I want, and if I want to use the N-word in my work, then I'm using the N-word in my work? Or were they talking more like, it's like black comedians who use the N-word all the time, and if I'm doing it to basically represent a certain point of view from a character, and this is the way that character would speak, why wouldn't I as a creator be entitled or be able to use that? She definitely presents it more as, or at least she implies from the way she describes the conversation, that it was more like, I'm white and I could do this if I want to, and why can't I do it? Like there's a real insensitivity to his insistence on using the N-word in his creative work, as opposed to, are they sitting down and having a somewhat academic discussion about this stuff like you and I do sometimes? So she says she has audio on that one, And in this case, I would say drop a dime. I mean, as far as she would in this video, she might as well just have ended it with playing the Wade thing, because I would have liked to heard that conversation. I said, because at that point, she ain't just drop a dime. She got a bunch of roller dimes, wrapped them up, taped up her fist, and she was giving overhand rights on that one throughout that whole video. So
So as far as that accusation, I have 4 clips of them.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to be strategic about putting them up. If you want to go to the video originally, you can see it in its original form. There's a lot of there's some drug use. She freely admits that she's drunk and high at the moment of recording it. There's a lot of colorful language. I've edited out some of it that I don't believe I can actually put on YouTube where my channel's at. So we'll look at the 4 clips. We'll look at the Mark Wade thing first, because I'm sure people want to hear this. Here it is.
When Mark fucking Wade said to me before I started writing comics that he felt it was okay to use the word in his book. I don't even remember the name of that shit. It was like a Black Superman book. Was it Dark Horse? No, it wasn't Dynamite. Dark Horse, the Image. One of them Boom. One of them books. I think it was Boom. One of them publishers. I ain't say nothing about that. And I said, mind you, I have audio. So let me have Mark Wade say, oh no, that's not the truth. I got audio, my dude. Because I was a journalist. So I have audio. So feel free to call me out on that shit, Mark. I ain't saying nothing about that. Because, again, I was the only one being heard. Even though I should have said something because other Black folks were reading this book. But listening to this old-ass white motherfucker tell me that it's all right to use the word and he didn't even say N-word, my guys. Like, he didn't even say the N-word. No. He said repeatedly to me, a Black woman, in Baltimore Comic-Con around other Black people.
So that's the full Mark Wade part of the allegation. Definitely affected her. You can definitely see there's a tremendous amount of frustration that he would use that term in front of her freely. With terms. I believe the comic book she's talking about is actually Strange Fruit from Boom Studios. Okay. I might be wrong on that one. But
because I don't know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What were you saying?
I was gonna say, because I was thinking first, I was like, maybe it was Insufferable or something like that, but I don't remember anything like that, or at least anything coming up out of Insufferable about that. But if it was Strange Fruit, I mean, I'll go check it out. But
Strange Fruit is about an alien that drops like into the South at a certain point in time. I've never read it. I read the synopsis.
Gotcha. So, and Strange Fruit, of course, is a reference to I believe it was the Nina Simone song, which is famous for its parallels to slavery and lynching. So yeah, it's yes. I mean that's the I would like to hear the audio for that, because if he's clearly writing a book set in that time when that word was used freely, if you're trying to do a book that's if you're giving him the supreme benefit of the doubt, even the minimum benefit of the doubt, something that's historically accurate, would he not be in some sense doing a disservice by not using that language from the time? Could he get the same point across not using the N-word? Probably, but if you are,
he probably could have got the same point across to her not using it, though. I don't think he's reading out of his book. He's having a conversation with her and other Black creators. Is the way I took it.
I get what she's saying. Like, the fact that he felt free enough to basically use the word unedited, if you will, in front of her, if that's where the offense is coming from, then she should have checked him right there. But it seemed like she was tying it into the fact that he was using it in the work, so that she says, I was the only one being heard at the time, but there were other Black people reading it. That it was like, to me, it was sort of says like, well, which one is it? Because if you didn't say something at the time because you were the only one being hurt, then it's like, well, why are you talking about it now? Because it was clear then that he was using the word in a way that she felt at that time he was hurting black people. She just realized she made a misjudgment. She made a poor judgment call and not calling him out then, whether it's him being disrespectful, if you will, using the word in front of her or putting it in print. It's like you call it out in the moment if that's how you feel about it. This is like I said, if somebody was, people, if they're going to use that word around me, or even if they're using certain, just vulgar words in general, they'll ask first if it's okay for them to say like F this or whatever it is. And I'm like, it ain't bothering me. Words on a certain level are going to kill me. It depends on the context.
Are my kids around?
Yeah, my kids around, It's like the fact that I'm a Christian, am I, you're okay with that, so on and so forth. And it's like when it comes to, basically the N-word at this point, it's like, yeah, you should just know honestly, you should just know to use the N-word. Why take the chance? I'm really surprised that he did it in any kind of recorded format.
You could lose your career.
Yeah.
If that kind of information comes out. And that's why it's kind of surprising. We've seen Mark Waid return recently to DC Comics. Mm-hmm. We just had the Detective Comics 1050 solicitation where he's doing like a world's finest Batman Superman. It sounds like it's the beginning of a mini series. So I would imagine, based on the fact that he's getting work even after these allegations, that they probably don't even know about this, even though the name of the channel is Ms. T. Franklin, which is the same thing as her social media. Mm-hmm. And you would imagine when you're going to hire a T. Franklin for a Harley Quinn Eat, Bang, Kill tour, that you would do at least a cursory search to see what's out there to be discovered. Even if they were checking up on her, you would have thought they would have found out about this allegation.
Oh no, look, I'll be perfectly honest. It's like I think there's a very likely chance DC didn't do a cursory social media search, any kind of a background check. It's like, we had talked about this a little bit right before, where he had asked me if I do the checks, and I was like, yeah, I do the checks, but it's like, honestly, you don't really know what you get with somebody until they get in there. Now, this one's been sitting out there. Like, look, I said, this YouTube video's been out for a year. I don't know when DC hired her. It's got 230-something views. It could have been something where DC took a look at it and just realized, okay, yeah, she's under the influence and she's saying a lot of things that doesn't make sense. And they may have talked with her about it privately and didn't require her to take the video down. And because it didn't make much of a stir other than that, then it was like, okay. I mean, Mark Waid didn't lose a job behind it. So, he doesn't necessarily have to go the defamation route, suing for defamation, if you will, because part of defamation, from what I understand, from both my TV legal beagle knowledge and having had a discussion with somebody one time, is that unless something actually happens to you, you can't really go after people with defamation because people have a right to say what they want to say. She can make all kinds of allegations, accusations she wants until
she has the audio. It's not defamation.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but she didn't play the audio. She just says, I have audio, but she didn't play it. So it's still just her making an allegation until you actually hear the receipts.
She has receipts for almost everything that she's talking about. She just hasn't really released any of it. And she does. She talks a lot about a lot of things in here in generalities. She only name drops a few people, Mark Waid obviously being the biggest one. I can tell you from my perspective, I'm shocked that even if he was talking about what his book was going to be about, if it had, time appropriate language that would be hurtful nowadays, that you would just say the N-word. That's the the kind of accepted. You know what I'm getting towards, but I'm being respectful and not using it because I know that it could be hurtful. So I'm surprised that you even do it. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, times have changed, and like she said, she puts in that qualifier at the beginning before I even got into comics. So, like I said, I don't know what their relationship was before she started working professionally. So it's like, it doesn't sound like they were friends from the way she was describing it. It doesn't sound like they even had a professional relationship at that point. So for him to feel so free to use that word just speaks to like really poor judgment on this part. It's like, look, you gotta be realistic about this. Some people say, well, black comedians use the N-word all the time in their routines. It's like, yeah, okay, so they're black comedians. It's like if someone has to explain to you at this day and age why they're getting a pass and you wouldn't as a white comic book writer, then I would suggest, much like our friend who's the guy, Frank, for the last one, who started profusely apologize for something that he claims he didn't do, but apologize for it anyway. Y'all need to get new friends. As you say, get somebody from Gen X to set you straight. Things have changed. you cannot have certain conversations that you might have been able to have before, that you may have been able to speak freely before, because people are going to quote unquote clap back now. And, in her case, she didn't, which raises some issues as well. Like, the fact that
it sounds like a lot of what this video is her regrets when certain things were happening and not calling the people out or not being public about it. And the vast majority of this, when the Mark Waid thing comes up, is, and the name of the video is "Dear White Comic Creators, Your Silence is Complicity," is the fact that all these people are hitting up her in DMs and asking her opinions on writing stories about black characters or using black pain, in their stories, and asking for opinion, but they're not out there vocally supporting Black Lives Matter.
Oh no, and I wish that she had actually, other than tangentially or trying to anecdotally remember the name of the book, because now I'm going to go pick up the Strange Fruit thing, because now the whole Black Pain reference makes sense. It makes more sense than it did before when I watched it. Which is that if you're going to write a book about that, speaking to the black, the black experience in America, and particularly during that painful and devastating time, then it's like, you think without having to be asked, then you would be able to speak out on more social justice issue, especially by the time she dropped this video. That would have been, it seems like it would have probably been about, October of last year. So definitely the whole George Floyd protest, June 2020, when the whole George Floyd protests were going on. And that was a big issue about who was supporting Black Lives Matter performatively as opposed to substantively. And that kind of
gets us to our we'll get to the second video where she kind of gets into that. Let's hit this one.
Yep.
Asking me to read a story about Black Lives Matter? T, can I get your opinion? You hitting me up, texting me on my motherfucking phone. Hey, yo, T, can you let me know what you think about this? You hitting me on my phone. Right, Scott Snyder?
Obviously, that's the other place where she kind of drops the name on there, saying that you have these white creators kind of hitting her up, asking for advice or everything, but it's all behind the scenes, but they're not willing to actually go out there and support what was a pretty big issue at the time.
Yeah. No, and honestly, they're not entitled or obligated to do so. I mean, they're just not entitled or obligated to do so. But the point, like you said, the point that she's making is, it's like, it's all right to come talk to me about these issues to help you make $1. And then when you see something that is, if not a direct continuation of the subject matter that you want to address, so you don't have a problem profiting off, you can't even crack your lips to say, hey, I just stand in solidarity with this, even just to give even a token effort towards it. Even just to say, hey, put hashtag Black Lives Matter up on your Twitter or your Facebook profile, or just to make a statement about it, which in some senses doesn't cost you anything unless you think it does cost you something. And then, I can see why somebody might be a little bit pissed when they feel like they got pumped for the last year, if not more, for their black experience, where somebody took, and, that gets into that. I don't know if it gets into cultural appropriation area, but, like, you feel like they've had no problem plumbing the depths, if you will, when it comes to that part. And then you would think that they would at least be able to say, hey, what happened to George Floyd was wrong, or what, back in the day, what happened to Trayvon Martin was wrong, or something like that. I mean, that just might be, she just might have been expecting too much for certain people, because I'm not interested in people performatively supporting Black Lives Matter. Like, I got no use for an Amazon being for Black Lives Matter, and then they treat Chris Smalls the way that they treated him. And if you don't know who Chris Smalls is, you should look it up, because that's I think is the issue that she's getting at, is that, and what she's saying is that basically with these white comic book creators, they didn't even do that. So these Amazon had the just to say, hey, we support Black Lives Matter, or the employees, I forgot who it was some companies that employees could wear Black Lives Matters t-shirts at the job. But it's like in the case of Amazon, they basically were treating a black worker by the name of Chris Smalls as basically as much a dehumanizing fashion as they possibly could. So, it was a whole, go look it up. It was a whole thing. It's like what they were saying privately in private about this dude totally contradicted their whole Black Lives Matter stance in the first place. If that's how you're going to treat one person, then you don't really believe that Black Lives Matter, and especially in the framework that is presented. So that's a legit point. That's a legit point. So,
and like she mentions couple times in this, she does not give any fucks. I mean, you drop in Scott Snyder, that's a pretty damn big name. Certainly a huge name at DC Comics. Would have been, would we've had Dark Knight's Death Metal just wrapping up. He would have been the main guy as far as writers at DC at the time. And it's crazy
and it's just like I said, and you have to look at the timing of all of this and take that into concern because, clearly there's more to it than the fact that she felt like, I think she, like you said earlier, I think she regrets keeping silent in those moments and how much of that was that she was breaking into the comic book industry and she was trying to get her foot in the door. And if you're constantly calling out white creators for their lack of sensitivity, if you will, or their lack of support, is that necessarily going to go into more jobs? Is she doing it now because she was, at least she may have felt she was firmly entrenched enough in the industry that she now felt that she could give a platform to the way she really felt about it? Was the whole fact that we were in COVID and George Floyd became this thing that, because we really all weren't doing anything, became so outrageous. It was so outrageous that now that was a catalyst for her to start speaking out on this. Because, I mean, that's what people tend to forget about the George Floyd thing is that, there was probably a bunch of different factors that went into people having such a visceral reaction to it. But for me personally, I always pretty much accounted to two things. One, that it was COVID and it was like our attention spans, we weren't being as distracted as much stuff and as much by life as we had prior to COVID. And I think too, it's just the whole fact of him crying, a grown man crying out to his mother. I mean, I think whenever I've heard people talk about it, that's the piece that's emotionally relevant to them. That's the piece that sticks out to them. And I think it should almost be a matter of basic just empathy and humanity to say that, regardless of what his criminal past was, regardless of whatever he supposedly allegedly had done, that's a pathetic thing to watch, especially being recorded. And it didn't have to go that way. So her feeling like she's got to make a video like this just to get some of her white colleagues or anybody to like basically say something in support of Black Lives Matter, or in support of things like this not happening to someone like George Floyd, it's like, yeah, and then you might be a little bit pissed, and being under the influence ain't helping when you're filming that response. It's just, but like I said, if you don't care,
in this video.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, but when people have had enough, and then, people have had enough, they've had enough. And then when they don't care, then that's when they're going to speak on something. So all those things that are holding them back, whether it's job security or, am I going to lose friends over this? Or, it's like that stuff goes out the window when you think, when somebody has really crossed the line, when I think they feel like you don't care what happens to them. I mean, that's what's going on in the society now in response to, when you look at all, what was it, like 5 million people quit their jobs in August, a great deal of which they're attributed to what they call vaccine epiphany. It's like, look, man, you can't for the last year, if not almost 2 years now, basically tell people to go kick rocks and figure it out for yourself and think they're not going to go, oh, so it's like that, huh? Oh, if it's like that, then you know what, keep your job then, especially when you give them the means to do it. Or sometimes it ain't even the means to do it. They just realize, nah, I ain't got to put up with this nonsense no more. Sometimes you do not want to try people. I know it became a real internet meme at one point, this nonsense tribey, #tribey. No, for real, you don't want to try people. You want to try people because when you let them know how you feel about them exactly, and they realize, like, what was it, Angela Maya, you said, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. When they believe you, then at that point, you can't be surprised at the responses you get. And like I said, and to be fair to Mark Waid and Scott Snyder, we're just hearing her side of this. We haven't heard their side of it. I don't think there's a response video out there to this. No. It may be 100% true. It may be 100% untrue, or it may be a little bit of both. But the simple fact of the matter is, I'm really surprised that Mark Waid is on, unless she recorded him without his knowledge, which, depending on the state, you can't do that, which may be another reason why she's not dropping it. But I'm surprised that if he had any inkling that she was recording him, that he would say that.
That's right. She does talk about a few other things, although the vast majority of this specifically is her frustrations over white creators not standing up for Black Lives Matter at that moment. But one of those things, there's a mention of a ramp where somebody didn't provide a ramp she is a disabled a person. I know what that one's about. That one's Heidi McDonald. There was a Comic-Con where T. Franklin was a panel member. Heidi, I believe, was the moderator of the panel. She didn't have anything to do with the con. And, I guess she got very upset with Heidi. I think she might have apologized for it. That wasn't Heidi's fault. I'm not the biggest fan of Heidi McDonald. Yeah. That wasn't your fault, Heidi. You shouldn't have apologized. That was the con. Whoever was promoting the con and setting it up, that was their fault. But that's what she meant when she's talking about a ramp. There's another part, and it's kind of, this thing's hard to really piece together when she's going on a new thought, because it's very chain of conscious kind of what she's doing. Yep. But I believe right before she starts talking about some of the sexual harassment stuff, which is pretty short, she mentions that there's a creator out there that was asking for her input on Wonder Woman, also some input on an Image comic that they're doing as well. At the time when she did this video, the Wonder Woman creator is Steve Orlando, but I can't confirm that it would be him, because there's a Wonder Woman like 750 that comes up right after this, and there's like 9 creators on that one. So it could have been a writer on that as well that was asking for input. We do know Steve Orlando does have an Image comic out, Commanders in Crisis, but that doesn't actually debut until later on in the year. It hasn't come out at this point. So I'm a little bit confused about whoever that person is. So don't jump to that conclusion that it has to be Steve Orlando, because Wonder Woman 750, that big comic that comes out, there's like 8 writers on that one. But this is what she has to say as far as the sexual harassment stuff.
I let a lot of shit. I don't bring up the fact about the sexual harassment claims. The people that you still associate with, who up here abusing women and shit.
And I had to be pretty close on the clip, because there's a lot of drug use around that one.
Yeah, no, and again, this comes down to the accusations that have been coming out in the industry for the past 6 months, if not the past year. It's like, Perch has mentioned and said on his videos, it's like some of this is just an open secret, and it's not limited to or confined to the comics industry. This is throughout our entire society. There's just been a lot of bad behavior, disrespectful behavior, illegal behavior, where that has gone on, where people just turn a blind eye to it, and there's no way of getting around it. I would highly encourage everyone, because I know you're a wrestling fan, Wes, and a few of you out there are wrestling fans, and we did a video about this last week, but there's a series called Dark Side of the Ring that's on Vice, where they talk about the plane ride from hell. And my man, Ric Flair does not come out looking good in this one, man. But props to Jim Ross, because I think if anything, you will see the parallels and kind of what Miss Franklin is talking about. But when Jim Ross is asked about why is it that nothing was done about with Ric Flair, he pretty much sums it up simply and honestly. Just says, because Flair's a made man. That's the only way to put it. It's like Ric Flair has a stature, Ric Flair has a position that basically, you're not, it was, if what happened, what was alleged to have happened had happened, and there seems to be plenty of corroborating evidence that was the fact, it was like the only reason nothing befell Ric Flair was because of who he was. It wasn't necessarily the culture of the time, because we're talking like the 90s at this point. So they like, this wasn't like pre-Donahue or pre-Sally Jesse Raphael, even being Clarence Thomas. It wasn't pre of that stuff. It's like at this point we all kind of have some inkling now. Sexual harassment isn't this like novel concept that it was 10 years before that, 10, 15 years before that, if I'm getting the timing right. And it was just like, it was just because of who he was. And that's why he got away with it. And that's what she's alluding to here, is that there are people who work in every industry where they engage some pretty vile, dehumanizing, disrespectful behavior, and again, illegal behavior, and they get a pass because of who they are and what they know, or what they contribute to the company, and so on and so forth. It becomes a bottom line issue. And
that's like hinting that people are speaking out against sexual harassment, but then they're still palling around and friends with people that are openly like known to be sexually harassing people in the industry.
And the thing is that again, it's the hypocrisy of it. So the thing is that now, is she calling for them to be canceled, or is she calling for them to be ostracized? Because I got nothing with a good ostracizing thing. I think it's better to actually confront people on it. And she just calling for them to simply confront them on it. I mean, but the fact that, like she's saying, it's the hypocrisy of it, is that you're saying you're for women on one hand, but then you're basically palling around with this guy on the other hand who's neck deep in it. who's neck deep in that kind of the sexual harassment, and in some cases, I've heard cases of actual sexual assault. And the thing is that how can you be silent about something like that? And then if you are silent about it, then you're complicit in it. And I think that's the much more compelling, because I kind of think it brings us to one of the more recent videos we did when we talk about should white people feel guilty, which I want to just say, use this as a moment to say real quick, because I did boost that post on the Animated Concepts page on the Facebook Animated Concepts Facebook page, and I just want to say the Thinking Critical community's response to that video was much more thoughtful, much more thoughtful, and much more productive than some of the conversation that was going on that Facebook page over Animated Concepts Facebook page. So I just want to say thank you guys for one. If you didn't actually watch the whole video, at least trying to address the question in a way that was at least thoughtful and not just jump into the most ridiculous or extreme presumptions and conclusions. But to bring it back around town, the simple fact of the matter is, when you talk about silence and complicity, if you see something that's going on, if you're aware that something's going on and you don't say something about it, are you complicit in that? Are you responsible for whatever goes forward from that? And I'd be interested to hear in the comments from people how they feel about that, because another situation to compare it to is the Larry Nassar thing with the guy who was the doctor for the physician for the women's Olympics team, and the fact that how long they had that gone on, and so many people who knew. Yeah, exactly. The guy from Michigan State, where there was clearly a group of people who knew what was going on, even to the point where one of the FBI agents who was investigating it basically pretty much all but brushed under the rug, because he was in talks with the USA Olympics team about possibly getting a job at some point in the future. It's like, okay, were any of them ones who basically, were they Larry Nassar and did they digitally rape the girls? No. But if you knew about it, did this, like, really? It's like, you think you're not saying something, you're not responsible for that? So, I mean, it's a legit point to make. I mean, the problem, if there's going to be a problem with this video at all, is not necessarily the substance of what she's saying. It's just the presentation of it.
It's the professionalism and the fact that she's high and drunk. Yes.
Yeah. That's what it is. I said this before here. I said, nowadays that's like because actually we ended up watching the episode about Blackish about this last night. Not Blackish, Mixedish. Because this is how the Lord likes to operate. Whenever I come on these shows, I get hit with all this stuff from nowhere that actually ties into what we're about to talk about. But it was like, it's a mixed family, so like the father's white, the mother's black, for people who haven't watched it, and it basically ties into Blackish because Anthony Anderson's wife, it's about her childhood when she was young. So the family was in the store where the aunt was with the kids, and one of them slipped and broke his arm, and they had to go give a deposition because the store was claiming that they were trying to scam them. And so because of the fact that the aunt presents very black, like she wasn't mindful of her Q's and all that P's and Q's and the language and the presentation, the grandfather who was representing her as the lawyer was like, she basically had to engage in code switching. She had to talk in the way she normally wouldn't, so that the jury would actually take her testimony credibly and seriously. And so the whole episode was built around, just because somebody presents a certain way, should they not be taken seriously in terms of the substance of what they're saying? Are they required to basically change their presentation in order to be heard, if you will? And I think that's where this video falls in that territory, because she's not saying anything that other people haven't said already, or making accusations about the industry that haven't been made already. It's just, and she's actually discussing the subject, which is real, which is, when is silence complicity, or is silence complicity? When you claim to, be concerned about one issue, but when something as obvious as George Floyd happens, and you don't say anything for whatever reasons you don't say it for, something which she herself is guilty of, which she admits. She's guilty of doing the same thing, of being silent. And in that silence, is she not complicit? And now what she's realizing that, hey, maybe if I had been silent, when I first talked to Mark Wade, maybe they would have responded to this differently. It gets complicated, and I ain't saying it to be a joke or to make a pun, but it's complicated, because it's like, but dude, you just the last year engaging in this. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I remember I was watching, I think it was 48 Hours, a very good TV show. Obviously, that was back in the States. And there's this case where these two people, I think it's one woman, she's found dead. And this woman comes forward, she's a sex worker, and she says, This guy hired me to be with the two of
remember that
them.
one. Yeah.
And she lays out exactly what happens. And when it's time for her to do her testimony, she's dressed very provocatively in court, and the jury does not take her testimony all that well. And they kind of just discredit her because of the way that she presented herself, the way she had spoken. And the guy that was accused, he ends up getting off. He's found not guilty. It wasn't a hung jury or any of that. It was not guilty. And then 2 years later, he had to sell his house to cover his legal fees. Somebody finds like a little crevasse within his house, and within that is the pictures that confirm everything that she'd said. But they couldn't try him again under double jeopardy. He'd already been found not guilty.
Yep.
But everything that she said was true. But it was because of the way she spoke and the way that she presented herself that the jury would not believe her.
Yeah, no, and that in some essence, until they basically shot themselves in the foot with it, was the essence
not
of
coaching
Me
her
Too.
up as a witness.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is that the essence of Me Too, which is that, you know, where they say just believe the woman, and it's like, yeah, you don't want to just believe the woman with no due diligence. But the thing is that regardless of whatever your personal biases, prejudices, whatever it is that you may, or even just distaste, or that you may have with someone, when someone is making an accusation or an allegation, it has to be taken seriously. You know, all it requires you to do is to verify what they're saying. That you know, and sometimes, yes, the mere fact that the accusation and allegation can do tremendous harm and damage. Haven't been a victim of that. I am not discounting it whatsoever. But I was going to say, having been a victim of that, is that I understood even at the time, questions have to be asked, questions have to be answered, evidence has to be determined so that we get to the right result. My only problem with the process that I went through was that the due diligence wasn't done. And that's the problem when you start to get into that Me Too thing, where you start to believe the accuser, no matter what is that sometimes it's not just that people lie. They either lie, they get facts wrong, they get things confused. You know, it could be an issue of context or nuance. There's a whole bunch of things that enter into it. But yeah, no, that's the problem with it, is that you're right. I remember watching that same episode, and it was like, the woman told the truth. It's just she wasn't dressed right. Because there's also a part
and
of
the
it, I'm
evidence
sure.
supported what she said to a degree.
Oh, no.
It just didn't fully support it because there wasn't all that physical evidence that they needed.
Yeah. It was basically, it relied on her being an eyewitness.
Yes.
And I can see at the same time with the lawyers also having a thought in their head that, yeah, but if we sit up there in a three-piece suit, all coiffed up and everything, and with a bag, and that's not normally she would look like, the defense would have a field day with that too. It's like, you know, it's like that kind of thing. They go, well, sir, you're saying that you gave this, that so-and-so confessed to you this, but, you know, you're known for basically snitching on your cellmates all the time for this and that. And what do you get that in exchange for? So there's always that thing, because I have a friend who was a lawyer. When I asked him about do focus groups serve any purpose, and he says, yeah, it's not so much that it changes your strategy, but it helps you to keep from making like little mistakes. Like, you know, if a person, and he was saying, if a person wears a certain tie, that tie alone could make that whole jury just go, nah, I don't believe that guy. Or become tuned off to them to such a degree that he could basically have like a map with timestamps or whatever laying out the whole play. They're just looking at his tie, just going, oh God, it's an ugly tie. Or, you know, like I say sometimes to people, I say, never trust anybody who wears a bow tie. So it's like, and if you're actually like thinking like that, the guy's wearing a bow tie, it's like, nah, son, I don't care what he says. Something wrong with somebody who wears a bow tie. And this is unfortunately the kind of world that we live in. But, you know, the thing is like I said, if I had to say anything about what T. Franklin's video is that I'm not so, and I guess I'll say the word, I'm not such a prude that I can't sit through somebody using drugs on the camera, obviously being high, drunk and high, or probably something else, and, you know, and using curse words to get to the substance of what she's talking about. But it's like, you also have to realize you live in a world where you can't be that naive at certain points. You just can't be that naive to think that your presentation, right or wrong, is going to reduce the chances of you being effective. Now, one day, hopefully, we'll get to a world where, you know, the skankiest human being in the world could see somebody getting murdered in broad daylight and be a credible witness. But until that day comes, we gotta work what we gotta work with. But
she doesn't do herself any favors. I have one more clip, and it's crazy the way she leads off this video, in my opinion.
Comic creators. Oh, you white comic creators who've reached out to me. and even the non-black people of color creators, y'all want to reach out? Y'all want to say shit? Bet. I'll be seeing y'all soon. Take care.
I mean, she's like kind of threatening the entire industry there.
Well, also, I'll say this. So technically, and those who are better legal beagles than I am can confirm or deny this. Technically, unless she tells you exactly what she's going to do to you, that's not legally considered a threat.
No, what I'm just saying is...
But having said that, because again, one of the situations I got into, because I made a similar comment where I said, you really don't want to go there. That was literally what I said in response to the person. And that person felt it was enough to go down to a court and get a restraint. There's an implication there. And when I say you really want to go there, because it's like, I'm just going to embarrass the hell out of you when you sit up here and try to come up with this so-called evidence and knock it down brick by brick on social media. Somebody else wants to take that and says, well, he threatened my life. And it's like, all right, good luck with that. And then when we went and had the little legal proceeding, that's exactly what the judge said. She said it was free speech. I can say whatever I want to say. And if you want to take that interpretation from it, that's your anxiety-ridden, paranoid-fueled mind that's coming up with that. All I'm saying, and especially when we're jumping over the fact that you went up there and basically accused me of being a racist based on something that I said that was in no way racist, prejudice, or bigoted whatsoever, because you're going after somebody else that's close to me. But that's another story for another day. But the simple fact of the matter is, yeah, it's like, if she's going to, clearly the threat is that I've got receipts, I've got records, I've got dimes to drop, and I'm going to drop them. And it sounds like she's saying, don't ever call me for advice about how to write a black character again, because if you do, then I'm going to present these so-called dimes to the world. And my thing is, I will give her some credit, partial credit, for at least naming Scott Snyder and naming Mark Waid, because I hear these stories from creators all the time about the racism, the sexism, and all this stuff in industry, but nobody's willing to name names because they want to work in industry. They're not trying to jeopardize their jobs, or they're trying to keep their jobs. And there's nobody that you're going to connect me to. It's like, oh, it's that guy there. No, it's everybody has these stories. Birch goes on his channel to talk about these stories. You've shared these stories where this stuff goes on all the time, but nobody's going to be dropping names. And it's a real simple reason. It ain't rocket science. Yeah, except for T. Franklin. So I was like, apparently something happened. Either she hit the lottery, or she came into some inheritance money, or what happened with George Floyd. What was going on at that time was so onerous that she couldn't stomach it no more. So it could be completely ethical, not this rational thing of self-preservation, that she was like, enough, that she felt the need to speak on it. So, I mean, it's It
really just speaks to the dysfunction within comics.
Yeah,
it speaks to
it does. It does.
DC. This video has been out for a year. You hired this person. They're dragging Scott Snyder, your biggest writer. You hired Mark Waid after this allegation came out. You're putting him on a Batman Superman book. You've got these other implications about Wonder Woman. Did you ask any questions? What is going on with DC Comics? What's going on with comic books? I don't blame her for being frustrated, but hey, you want to get high and drunk and go on YouTube? I wouldn't suggest.
Yeah, it's a free country. No, I wouldn't suggest it either. But it's a free country. You could do whatever you want. And, and I'm all for that. And like I said, the things is actions have consequences. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But it's like, if it ever comes back to bite you in the behind, you can't say that, you did, freedom comes with responsibility. So that's what it is.
I hear about this kind of stuff all the time. When I say this kind of stuff, I mean people absolutely breaking down and kind of losing it.
Yep.
But I've never heard of anyone actually recording it and uploading it to social media.
Oh no, it's something else. So I mean, like I said, if she feels that secure in her job, or if DC is like that, basically they're not that diligent, then she has stood her ground for a year. Because she says in the video, she says, I'm not going to delete this joint. Sure enough, she didn't. She sure hasn't. And when it comes to DC, all I can say is either DC, you have to give. Well, DC, if they feel like they need to respond to it, can do so. But either DC saw this video, investigated claims, determined there was nothing to it, and kept it moving, and didn't feel the need to make her take it down or force her to comply, whatever it is. They haven't seen it because it hasn't been brought to their attention, and they didn't do the due diligence work. And probably the more probably the worst case scenario, depending on who you talk to, is they did see it and they just figured because of the nature of the accusations and because who she is and the marginalized groups that she represents, it's like, nah, son, I ain't touching that. It's like they might be going into some PR. Hey, look, man, that might be a PR disaster, because when I did a little bit of cursory research on her, as she says, you get from the video with the ramp that she's disabled. She definitely identifies as queer. She's and she says people outed her, but she puts in the video she's a former sex worker. She's black and she's a woman. And all I can say to someone is good luck with that one. Good luck with that one, because while you think you're getting a good job over here comes the from the other side. It's like, man, as a cis black male, I wouldn't touch it. That's all I'm saying.
It's interesting stuff. It's just really a spotlight on a number of different issues on a number of different levels. I thought it would be interesting to talk with you about.
It's worthy of discussion and conversation, and I can't wait to see what other people's takes are on this once they watch this video, because it does hit on a lot of areas. I mean, it's like, I think it's almost a shame to merely judge it on the merit of how she presented it. Like when she clearly was upset, frustrated, in an inebriated state. But it's like, if you get past that and then you actually delve into what she's talking about, there's a lot there, guys and gals. There's a lot there that we've all heard before. And, and like I said, I give her some credit for naming names, because it's like, there's nobody who works as a professional who would basically drag somebody publicly and basically not present the evidence at the same time, or be prepared to present it. But the fact that she hasn't even been asked to present it, I think is also interesting. Like I said, the video's only gotten, like you said before, the video's only gotten 200 something views. I don't think I've ever heard, until you brought it up in terms of a topic for us to discuss, I don't think I've ever heard it mentioned at any point, even tangentially. So yeah, this is interesting. This is curiouser and curiouser, as they say.
Absolutely. I do want to say thank you very much to Gervain to help me talk about this. Interesting stuff. That's why we got the channel. We'll see what happens next time.
Complicated, baby. Complicated.